Have you ever wondered what lurks beyond the boundaries of our perception? About what might be hiding in the dark, ready to awaken? Today we will delve into a mysterious world where a black soul comes to life and its mystique is breathtaking. This story is not just a short story, but a dive into the shadows of human nature. Prepare to open the doors to the unknown, where every whisper and every shadow could be the start of something terrible. Will you be able to expose the secrets it holds? Welcome to a world where light meets darkness, and reality and fiction intertwine in a thrilling dance. Stay tuned, because something incredible lies ahead. A little girl who looked like a doll looked curiously at the remains of a gray rabbit. Someone had torn the fluffy little thing to shreds. Noticing a drop of red color on her shoe, the girl carefully wiped it off and, jumping up and down, went for a walk. Not a drop of fear, upset about the pet she did not feel. She was 5. Daria married for love. Denis, the husband, treated his wife with great care, love and pampering. By the time he married Dasha, Denis was on his feet, had a house and a business. Dasha worked, took care of the house, the family seemed perfect. Several years passed, peace reigned in the couple, but there were no children. The woman was examined, treated, went to a sanatorium, to no avail. Then she fell into religion, traveled with her husband to monasteries. In the end, the couple reconciled and began to live for themselves. As something, Daria alone went on vacation, choosing a recreation center in the mountains. She spent 2 weeks there and 3 months later learned of the pregnancy. The happiness made her head spin, she could not believe it. But the interesting position was confirmed in the hospital. Denis was confused a little from the surprise, but glad. Before the birth, he literally carried his wife in his arms. When the daughter was born, Denis was initially afraid even to take her in his arms. She seemed to him a fragile princess. The girl was named Anastasia. Nastya became not just a light for her parents, but rather the meaning of life. When the girl turned 3, Dasha first paid attention to the child's behavior. If the girl didn't like something, she would freeze for a while, close her eyes and turn very pale, as if listening to something, and then suddenly, she could throw herself at her mother, screaming, biting and fighting. The mother took her daughter to all possible specialists. They prescribed treatment, but did not diagnose her. The child was too young. Treatment and rehabilitation helped. Nastya became calmer. There were no attacks of aggression. "Denis, wake up! There's someone in the house!" Dasha whispered in her husband's ear, trying to wake him up. That night she woke up suddenly and heard voices at once. A low voice came from her daughter's bedroom. She did not hear the girl's voice, which frightened her greatly. Denis woke up and, taking his gun, went to the child's room. "Dasha!" her husband called softly. The woman who came running froze on the threshold, clutching at her husband's arm with such force that he cried out. Their beloved Nastya, their little daughter, was sitting on her bed. The sheet, blanket and pajamas were red-stained, as was the girl's face. Her face and hands were stained red, and there was an unpleasant metallic odor and the stench of decay in the air. Nastya smiled. Dasha took a closer look and fainted, screaming terribly. There were wisps of gray wool on the floor, the same color as their pet rabbit. "Something must be done," Daria said the next day, pacing the living room. "What? I'm not sending my own daughter to a mental institution, and it would be very bad for business. I'll get a doctor, we'll treat her at home, get a nurse. It's good that we live in the country," Denis replied tiredly. It was as if he had aged 10 years during the previous night. Denis kept his word. A nanny came to the house and a doctor came 3 times a week. The days became heavy and dreary. The man tried to spend more time in the city, at work, and Dasha fell into a deep depression. "Mom!" Nastya walked quietly, as if she was sneaking up. "You scared me," Daria replied sharply, turning to her daughter. "Come with me." The daughter looked slyly at her mother. Nastya took her mother's hand and led the way. Daria in her heart prepared for the worst, but it was all right. On the table by the window in her daughter's room lay an album. Art therapy was effective in their case. Nastya drew a lot. Dasha slowly went through the sheets with drawings, trying to keep herself in control. The drawings depicted them, even Denis's mother. Everything was drawn in detail. The child had an obvious talent, but the subjects gave her a chill. Death and murder were drawn everywhere. Where does a child get such a thing in her head? "Do you like mommy?" Nastya looked slyly at her mother. Then Dasha noticed that the color of her daughter's eyes changed from gray to black. She involuntarily recoiled. "You don't like it? Why? Why did you draw it?" Dasha asked. "Because I want to. It will be. It's just a reprieve." Nastya spoke in an alien detached voice. It wasn't her daughter. "What did you say? You're all going to die!" She said it with such an intonation as if she was voicing the weather forecast. "Die, then rot!" Dasha backed away from the girl and leaving the room, ran. On the first floor she began to hurriedly dress, her hands were shaking with terror. What was now in their house was not Nastya. She no longer understood anything at all. Somehow she called her husband and told him everything. "Mommy, are you going somewhere? Are you going to leave me alone?" Nastya appeared out of thin air. Dasha turned to the girl doomedly. Denis arrived late, and not alone. He saw what his daughter was doing and could no longer write it off as an illness. He had been recommended to him by a woman who was well versed in such things. And if at first he doubted, but after seeing one scene, Denis was afraid. He, a strong grown man, was scared of a little girl. Just seeing his daughter catch a chicken in the poultry house and tear its head off, that was too much. The woman's name was Nadezhda Ivanovna, and she lived in a village far from the city. She agreed as soon as Denis told her about her daughter. Nadezhda barely looked at the girl when she arrived, but she was very interested in the girl's mother. There was something wrong with her. "And you're a labeled girl," the witch remarked. "You were doing something, hence the consequences. What are you talking about?" Dasha looked surprised and scared. "The ritual," Nadezhda Ivanovna answered briefly. "What ritual?" Denis intervened in the conversation. He had just given Nastya an injection and she had fallen asleep. "At least there are a few hours of safety. You did the right thing. We need to talk without her. There's a demon in the girl and it was planted in the womb. If nothing is done, she'll be rid of you by the time she reaches puberty. Believe me, a simple death would be a joy," the old woman said. She turned to Dasha again. "Speak. What did you do?" Denis shook his wife by the shoulders. She was scared and didn't know how to tell everything. "What did you do?" "I did nothing," Daria screamed, breaking out of her husband's arms. "We both wanted a child, I certainly did. More to the point, I went to the mountains for a vacation, remember? Let's say. What does that have to do with it? Or did you cheat on me there?" "No, Dasha stammered. "She took part in the ritual. Didn't she?" The old witch came in unheard and must have overheard their conversation. "Yes, but I was promised a child," Daria cried. "Explain it normally," Denis asked more calmly. Nadezhda Ivanovna spoke first, and then Daria told the whole truth. Daria wanted a child so badly that she agreed to anything. She was offered an excursion to a mountain village where a real witch lived. For curiosity's sake, she went. Already there, she was offered to participate in the ritual of fertilization. Dasha laughed and refused, taking the whole action as a performance for tourists. As a matter of fact, it was. A day later, the witch's assistant came to her and offered her a real ritual. They talked for a long time, then she met with the witch again. She was promised pregnancy, easy labor, and a healthy child. She paid a decent amount of money for the ritual, and it worked. Nastya was born. And now Daria does not understand what happened to her daughter, but connects everything that happens with that ritual. It's a ritual, she's telling the truth. Only Daria was used in the dark, the evil was planted, said the old woman. What do you mean? Denis asked. Directly. When Daria arrived at the base, she was already pregnant. The witch saw it at once and she needed to get the demon in. She performed a ritual and the demon settled in the girl. Why would she do that? Well, she serves the Dark Lord, she couldn't disobey. The demon basically gets to live in the human world. It is better not to think why and why. Such thoughts will make you sick, said the old woman sternly. You should think how to save the girl. Soon the demon will completely displace your daughter, only her shell will remain. There will be a lot of harm from her. No walls will not hold her. What do we do? The parents asked in unison. I need to get ready and in 3 days come to my village, bring what I write on the list. Behave as usual, don't arouse suspicion. I warn you at once, it will be difficult, scary, and you'll have to pay. You have to pay for everything, the woman sighed heavily. How much? Denis asked. The powers that be will set the board themselves. I'm not the one who sets and decides. For the next 3 days, Dasha and Denis tried their best to behave as usual. Denis took a vacation, informing the office that he wanted to be with his family. They went for walks in the woods and rode horses from the neighboring farm. They rode with Dasha, but Nastya wouldn't go near the stables. She was afraid of them, and they were afraid of her too. And in general, she never got along with animals. We'll go to Grandma's for the weekend, Denis said at breakfast on Thursday. What grandmother? Nastya rounded her eyes. Do I have a grandmother? Yes, you do. Why doesn't she come? Doesn't like me or she didn't like my game? Nastya innocently flapped her eyelashes and in her eyes triumph. What he saw made the man shudder. 6 months ago, his daughter maimed his mother, stuck spokes in her face, after which the woman was left disabled. Denis's mother categorically refused to communicate and see her granddaughter. She didn't want to hear any talk about her illness. In some ways, the woman was right, saying that the girl should be taken to church to some grandmothers, but not to psychiatrists. "There's a demon in the girl. It's not your daughter," screamed the man's mother as she was being taken away by ambulance. "She has a black soul." The car drove slowly down the country road, the first drops of rain falling on the hood, drying instantly. In the back seat sat Nastya in the child seat. Daria settled in the passenger seat. The navigator was silent for over an hour. There was no communication either. When the village houses appeared ahead, Denis breathed a sigh of relief. We'd made it. He was no less afraid of his daughter than he was of Daria. The witch met them at the gate. She looked sternly at the parents and softer at the girl. She understood that it wasn't her fault, it was all the wickedness. "Poor child, come into the house," the woman invited them in. Nastya looked around the yard warily at first, not daring to go into the house. The girl sniffed like an animal. Dasha was creepy, she was afraid of her own child. Was it a child? "Well, what are you? Let's go into the house, tasty treat." The owner of the house stood on the threshold of the house and called Nastya. For a moment the girl stopped looking warily at everyone and stepped over the threshold of the house. At the same moment Nastya screamed. A chilling scream tore the soul of the parents. The girl collapsed on the floor like a hamstring. Denis took her in his arms and carried her into the house. Nadezhda Ivanovna strictly instructed them to have less physical contact with her daughter, and not to interfere, whatever happened. "Here, you carry this." Daria was handed a heavy basket by her grandmother. "The father will carry the baby." "Why is she unconscious?" Dasha asked. "Because he won't go there voluntarily and won't let himself be exorcised. It's such a trap for demons, and we have almost 6 hours to do everything." "We won't get a second chance," said Nadezhda Ivanovna. An elderly woman was leading the way, followed by Denis with his daughter in his arms, and Daria trailing behind. The closer they got to the forest, the more the weather deteriorated. They had to walk not far, and stopped at the edge of a swamp. The swamp was so picture-perfect, as if painted. They came. Denis carefully put Nastya on his jacket and began to help Nadezhda Ivanovna with the fire. Dasha stared blankly at them, standing on the edge of the swamp. Her thoughts were far away from this place. Lately the woman had become gaunt and dull. "Why haven't we seen anything before?" Denis asked the witch. "That's how it happens most of the time. The people closest to you are the last to know. An imp is good at hiding his true nature. And here, I don't know what played a role. Maybe you're Nastya, the real Nastya, doesn't want to die and is fighting hard." Yes, she's a fighter," the old woman grinned. "Then you will recognize your daughter anew." The flames of the fire were almost clinging to the treetops, the size of the fire. Reflected in the water, strange images appeared. Dasha looked at the water as if mesmerized. The old woman took out a kitset with mixed ash and salt, lit candles with wormwood, gave her parents sheets with a spell. Before that she drew a circle in which she laid a rope and doused everything with fuel. As soon as they started the ritual, she set the circle on fire, the flames soared to the heavens, the protection was activated. They read the spell in the order the old woman had set. When the mother began to read, the ground under their feet shook, a gust of strong wind almost knocked people off their feet. They read without interruption, despite the fear. Outside the circle, somewhere in the forest, there was a non-human laughter that turned into a roar. The girl's body suddenly twitched in spasms, arched and lifted off the ground, hovering in the air. Nastya's body floated in the air, scaring her parents to death. Suddenly the child's eyes flew open and she stared at her mother with pupilless black eyes. "You! It's all you!" The voice was not Nastya's, too low. "Because of you, everyone suffers. To please yourself, you ruined everyone's life. It's all your fault." The imp was spewing horrible words from the girl's mouth, laughing an eerie laugh, but the parents and the witch didn't stop. The mother uttered the last words of the spell, and at the same moment the body fell to the ground. "Tie her up," the old woman ordered briefly. They had to give Nastya holy water with ash, and the demon would not drink voluntarily. This was the last step in the rite. The demon in the girl's body resisted as best it could, swearing with terrible words, cursing, begging, but still they managed. Nastya twitched strangely, rolled her eyes and lost consciousness again. Dasha sat on the ground with her daughter in her arms, salty tears dripping to the ground. Denis sat next to her. Both were silent. There were no words left. Mommy? Daddy? It was the real voice of their daughter. Dasha wanted to hug her husband as suddenly she felt pain in her body. Her spine felt like it was burning with fire. From the intense pain, the woman screamed and lost consciousness. Denis rushed to his wife. Nastya cried. "It's the fee," said Nadezhda Ivanovna sadly. "Mommy, look! There was a ladybug crawling on her little hand." "Ladybug," Daria said. "Where are the horns?" Nastya made surprised eyes looking at her mother. "Girls, let's go home, it's getting dark and cold." "You must be cold." Denis went down to the family in the garden. "Daddy, it's not dark yet, it's dusk. All the animals are already home," said the man, picking up his daughter in his arms. "You run home, we'll be right with Mom." He immediately faltered. Daria was sitting in a wheelchair. She couldn't feel anything below her lower back. The doctors called it hysterical paralysis, only she and her husband knew the truth. She was paying for her mistakes. Denis did not lose hope to put his wife on her feet, and Dasha herself was just happy. With Nastya, everything is fine. She became like a normal girl of her age. Now she goes to kindergarten, where she has many friends. She was given a kitten and a turtle, which she takes care of herself. With Denis, they have a good relationship. Finally, her dream came true. There was peace in the family, and she always believed in the best.